I am really looking forward to this session. We're going to talk about digital literacy for the community, but I think it's even more specific than that. What we want to try to accomplish in this session is to talk about how we can bridge the digital divide that we're seeing more and more around the world. So I want to invite our panelists today to first answer this question. And my first question is going to be for Dina. And the question is this: we're seeing an acceleration of technology around the world during this crisis. For many businesses, this could be beneficial, but the truth is there are going to be many people and companies that potentially will be left behind. Dina, when it comes to developing communities, how do we ensure that they're able to keep up?
And the key to this entire approach is digital literacy and how you actually be inclusive in the approach. And one of the things which we generally have been seeing across the globe is that, a lot of technology adoption is predominantly focused on the people who have affordability on digital technologies. And as a result of that, we end up losing out a large community which do not necessarily have access to those technologies. And that's one very key element. But I think the adoption of some of these technologies is growing. We have seen at least a family member having access to digital technologies. And I think that's the first starting point, at least if it approaches one person per family, then at least you have hope of its adoption at a much larger scale. So I think that is one key element. When we look around, we should be inclusive in our approach. I think that is one key element that I would say is important for us to look into.
Dina, I think you make a really good point in terms of education and accessibility. Ganesh, I want to turn this question to you, but I want to add an artificial intelligence lens to the question, because I know that most of the work that you're doing today, we're seeing artificial intelligence within your organization touch on everything from HR to sales. When we talk about AI, we're also seeing countries around the world that are educating communities on how to adopt artificial intelligence. What role do you think AI plays when we're talking about digital literacy and bridging this divide?
I think AI plays a very critical part. And if you look at just stepping back, even before AI started, right, internet came in around 2000 and really picked up. And it has been the fundamental fabric for us to bring that net neutrality across the world. And if you look at the recent numbers that came from India, the internet usage in rural India actually overtook urban areas just this month. I think it was about 227 million active users in rural areas compared to 205 million in the cities, right? And that, along with the aspect of having a affordable device, mobile device, has really accelerated the adoption of AI. And AI to me is almost like an accelerating factor to bring that net neutrality, where it gives you the same access as you would see in urban cities. So I strongly believe that AI has come to a point with the right infrastructure and the support, which would bring closeness of the urban and the rural cities across the world, not just in India.
Dina, you are focused within your organization on analytics, and it strikes me when we talk about this divide that exists and improving digital literacy, that at the end of the day, one thing that we need more of is the ability to measure who has access. Can you give us some insight into how analytics can help and play that role so we're able to then improve that and close that divide?
I think a very important aspect to look at is about data. And understanding the data which is there to get a feel of where things are moving is very critical. So when you look at any of these social transformation initiatives, data plays a very critical role. Just when we were discussing, we talked about urban and rural. But if you really look at further breaking it down, on the other end of the urban spectrum are the metros, which are really mega cities. Then you have on the rural side, there is also another element, which is the tribal belt. So if you look at India as a country, for example, has 4 different sectors. And when you look at this particular aspect, it is very critical to understand that each of these will have different patterns, different type of requirements, and data and insights on that data will play a very crucial role. And hence, once you have large volumes of data and there is abundance of data, however, how it is getting collected, how it is getting analyzed plays a very critical role. And the expertise that is required from a data science and analytics point of view will play a very critical role. And especially the government organizations and the not-for-profit organizations, we've been focusing on looking at such organizations which play a very critical role in the transformation in a data-driven manner.
It's interesting too, and Ganesh, I'm going to come back to you for this question. If you look around the world at those companies or those countries that are able to really accelerate the adoption of artificial intelligence, there's a lot happening on the education front. And I'm thinking specifically about countries such as Finland, where we know that they've made AI courses available for free to all of their citizens, including prisoners, to ensure that everybody has equal access. And so my next question for you, Ganesh, is around this equal opportunity. What do we need to do around the world to ensure that there is an equal opportunity in terms of access to new technologies?
I think it starts with government policies. And if you bring the government and the policies along with the private sector, that's where I think the marriage would help in terms of bringing some of the core technologies that may be a little unaffordable at scale, would be subsidized by the government. That's the only way for the mass to get hold of the AI. And when you think about artificial intelligence, it's just a matter of understanding patterns and giving insights at a much faster pace. And with the cost of data driven down by close to 100% or more, it becomes a lot more easier task for the government to roll out these policies, to work with the private sector to take these into any part of the country.
So when we talk about challenges that exist, we know there are challenges in terms of governments around the world who perhaps are not moving quickly enough. Dina, my question for you in terms of the biggest challenge that you see right now as far as ensuring that digital literacy is a reality for as many people as possible, what do you see as the #1 hurdle right now in developing countries?
I think the #1 hurdle, which was about accessibility and making the democratization of all this content, has been taken care of with the current situation that we are faced with. So if you really look at this phase that we are going through, will potentially redefine the way the democratization of all of these available access will be made up to the masses and the population. So if you really look at the hurdle in those cases was about technology, and people were holding back and making it available only for the people who could afford it. And given the current situation, if you look at the number of courses which are now available across the board, pretty much on demand, I think that has made a very big difference. So when we used to go and interact with kids across different sections of the society, be it in rural India or tribal India, there were people with significant amount of potential, but just did not have the access. And now with all the accessibility which has been created by many of the institutions, many online portals and stuff like that, I think that biggest hurdle which was there on democratization has been taken care of. So I think we should be very thankful in some way towards the current situation that we are faced.
I think this leads nicely into my last question for Ganesh, and this is a question about what keeps you hopeful. I know we're now in a time of crises where people have so many different challenges beyond just thinking about the digital divide. But Ganesh, every day, what keeps you hopeful that we are going to be able to do better in this area?
I think the biggest hope for me is the aspect of having these fundamental fabric of internet bringing us together. I always wonder what would have happened if COVID would have been when there is no internet. What would have happened if COVID happened when there was no Amazon or no Instacart? We would have fundamentally have been crippled. And my hope is to accelerate the adoption of these platforms and technologies that can really improve the quality of every humans. Because as we go down the lane, we would be hit with more uncertain situations. And with technology, I think it can bring a lot more normalcy within what we are doing and as a part of our day-to-day activities. So that's my only hope.
Dina, I'm going to ask that last question to you as well, but I'm going to add a bit of a twist to that question, because we know there are people watching now, and in some ways people tend to feel helpless, not really sure what to do. To the leaders who are watching today, Dina, what would you say to them in terms of being able to do something to step up and help to bridge this gap?
I think the one thing which I will tell people is be aware of your surroundings, be inclusive and looking at who all is there out there, because you generally get blindsided with what you see. I think leaders should really look at being inclusive and looking at the larger population, because it's not only the set which we are aware of. That's one element which I would encourage leaders to take that step, go out, look for who is really hungry for that information or that service that we are trying to provide.
Dina and Ganesh, thank you so much for joining me today and having this conversation. Hopefully we've given people some ideas about what they can do, and as well some hope for the future. Thanperfithr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.